Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And hang on, I just tweeted out the wrong link to the show tonight. So I have to fix that. And give me 1 second because for some reason this started up a different link than I thought it was going to. So that was kind of weird. But let me get this right and then we will go from there. So that was a little surprising, but we'll get this tweeted out in a second. Okay. So welcome anyway, everybody. And going to be talking a lot, of course, about the NFC North and the Minnesota Vikings. So jump right into the mix here and questions, comments, thoughts. At 7:30 this evening, we will have Manny Hill picking the Vikings schedule as he does each week. And yes, even though the Vikings did not play, we are still going to have Manny pick the schedule because so much changed in the NFL this week that we have to continue with doing that. And what is on my mind tonight is really who is going to win the NFC North, how we see this ending up playing out for every team in the NFC North, not just the Minnesota Vikings, but what the order is going to be, how it's going to end up working out this year, and also at the end of the season, and also Aaron Jones and his health is a big deal for this week. And we saw today out at practice that Aaron Jones was practicing today a little bit, and it was a very light practice for the Vikings. So it was hard to say whether Aaron Jones was taking kind of a real practice or he was just starting to do a little ramp up. On Wednesday will really be the day where we get a good sense for whether Aaron Jones is actually going to have a chance at playing this week with his hip injury, which I think is maybe the biggest factor in this entire game, is whether Aaron Jones ends up playing, because everything has played off of Jones so far this year with the offense, and they were clearly very different when he was not in the game against the New York Jets. That Ty Chandler is just not as versatile, does not bring the same sort of presence or even intimidating factor where the defense has to pay attention to him when he's in the backfield. And the versatility, the screen game, the blocking, all those things that he does at an elite level. And also he allows that if you don't block perfectly, he can still find a way to 4 or 5 yards, which I think Ty Chandler is not quite as good at. Okay, now I'm tweeting this out. Okay, so gather your thoughts amongst yourselves, put them in the comment section. Let me know what's on your mind for the next half hour. We'll chat, we'll have a good conversation, and then Manny will pick the schedule about 7:30. So what is the number one thing on your mind as we lead into Vikings and Detroit Lions? Now, give me a second. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, now I'm ready. I've gotten pretty good over the years of doing two things at once, but tweeting and talking is probably dangerous because you can make a pretty bad mistake. So why don't we get right into it here? With JP says, I think we can win the North, but someone's got to keep Kevin, young Bruce Arians, aware that he needs to keep running the ball like on week 1 through 3. Screens and short passes are really important. I agree with you completely, JP, that I think that Kevin O'Connell is a guy who gets a little bit of tunnel vision at times, where it's calling plays that he thinks will work at any given moment. Here's what the defense is playing. Here's what play is going to have success. I'm pushing that button. Here's what I've seen from the defense. Here's my trust in my quarterback. Here's my receivers getting open. And if you go back and watch the Jets game, there are a number of opportunities for Sam Darnold to find open wide receivers in some of those situations where he did dial up passing plays and you were at home. And I was thinking, Kevin, can we just throw a short underneath pass here, or get a quick completion, get a swing pass, get a screen pass, get something that is going to keep the clock running, keep your defense off the field, churn out some first downs but also if you look at the tape, the receivers are open. So the play call that Kevin O'Connell dialed up is also something that definitely worked. It's just that it wasn't really the right thing for the situation and probably wasn't the right thing for who was playing at the time and who they were playing against. I mean, they're playing against such a tremendous New York Jets defense that maybe it just wasn't the right time to do some of that stuff. But I also think too that after that game, even though we have asked Kevin O'Connell on the show a number of times, hey, man, you're going to have to really focus on the game management part with your play calling, and the over aggression has put the defense on the field too much. And Sam Darnold has had now several times where he's turned the ball over when you have the lead and you need to find a way to make sure you prevent that. I don't think that permeates Kevin O'Connell. I really don't. I don't think that it is the way that he is ever going to approach the game. He is got his own mind in the body of that quarterback, and he is dialing up plays the way he would do it if he was out there running them himself. And that aggression, throwing downfield, trying to create explosives, trying to put daggers in teams, it's going to be who Kevin O'Connell is. And I think what I decided after the last week is I'll probably have other instances throughout the season where I'm talking about this or where I'm saying, hey, O'Connell, trust the run game, trust the screen game, trust the short pass. But maybe TJ Hockenson is a major factor here where you can end up trusting TJ Hockenson a little bit more and continuing to go back to TJ Hockenson in those short situations. But there's also maybe just the fact that he's not going to ever take the foot off the gas, and we're all going to have to strap in and deal with it. And I really think that that's something that is probably going to be the case here, because even in 2022, I thought there were times where they allowed teams to get back in the game, but the excuse for not running the ball then was, well, Dalvin Cook is really struggling and just doesn't look the same. So you have to continue to throw and you have to keep the gas pedal down because Donatel's defense is so bad. And it almost feels like O'Connell has not quite adjusted to the fact that he has the number one defense. But on the other side of the coin, he might say, well, we have the top defense, so we can be more aggressive because if we make a mistake, then we know the defense is going to make up for it. I suppose that you could make a pretty strong argument there as well. There will be definitely opportunities to pick apart what O'Connell has done with some of the play calling when they're up. At the same time, if he is going to live and die by this aggressiveness, it's kind of like how when a team lives and dies by three-pointers, a basketball team, and well, now kind of almost every team does, but if a team is really, really specifically charged to shoot threes, then when they're up 10 points, you're like, hey, dump it down to the paint or take a little mid-range, a little safe jumper, and they're hucking threes, and you're going, come on, guys. That's who they are. That's what their identity is going to be. And they're going to take that all the way to the end of that road. And, you mentioned Bruce Arians. It was with Tom Brady, but he won a Super Bowl. He got deep in the playoffs with Carson Palmer doing the no risk it, no biscuit. And, there is a little bit, I think Palmer was better early in his career than Sam Darnold. But if we were doing comparables, Carson Palmer and Sam Darnold, big arm USC quarterbacks who throw the ball downfield and who had a lot of ups and downs in their careers because they pushed the ball downfield as much as they did. So I think that they will keep doing it. What I would like to see is just a little bit better on the game management side also from Sam Darnold, because there were some underneath opportunities that he also passed up himself that could have potentially been there. And he didn't throw. So it wasn't just all O'Connell. Sometimes it was, dude, you've got something underneath there and you're just not getting the ball off. So Darnold has to be a little more balanced as he goes into the second half of the season or whatever we're calling it, in part just with throwing to Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the NFL. He's a great asset for any quarterback. But I think what you saw a little bit in the Jets game was Darnold get a little too much Jefferson centric, where every play starts with Sam Darnold trying to throw to Justin Jefferson, as it should. At the same time, you have to know when to come off of that to work the other guys. There was a play where Josh Oliver was open. There was a play where Johnny Munt was wide open, and he just forced the ball toward Jefferson. So even though we say it's always good to throw the ball to Justin Jefferson, it can also not be 100% always super wise to force it to him when you have other options. And it's incredibly difficult for a quarterback when you have an elite receiver to strike that balance of like, okay, this is a play where I need to get off of that top read because he's double teamed, but also Jefferson catches the ball when he's double teamed. It's not an easy situation. I mean, it's a champagne problem, but it's also something that every quarterback with a receiver of that caliber does have to learn a little bit. As they go into this week, though, I will say that last year, Nick Mullins didn't throw to anybody else, and it worked out great to pick up a lot of yards where he just targeted Jefferson over and over. So maybe that will be the case with Sam Darnold against the Detroit Lions, where lots of other quarterbacks have had a ton of success with throwing against the Detroit Lions. So we'll have to see how that works out. But I do think that you're just going to have to strap in and understand that when O'Connell's team is winning, it's going to be gas pedal down. When they're eventually losing again at some point, gas pedal down. Like there's not really another gear. It's if you used to, now everybody throws 100 miles an hour now, but in Major League Baseball, when they used to bring in closers that threw 100, and that was all they did. They came in and they just threw fastball, 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 and every once in a while somebody hit one in the stands. Well, but they struck out more guys than they allowed home runs. So it might be the same sort of thing where you're going to get more success overall, but there will be a time or two where we are frustrated with that approach. I don't think it's going to change. After last week, I thought if there was any time where it was going to change, it was then. It probably won't. Blowfishes says to run the ball that way and incorporate screens, we need Aaron Jones to remain healthy. A different option to Chandler. Chandler is great, but a completely different running back to Jones. Yes, I am 100% with that comment. Aaron Jones has changed the shape of this offense. They can do so many more things. They can lean on the running game in ways that they couldn't before. They have more opportunities to run play action. It's not just the success of play action, it's the opportunity. If you are in 2nd and 5, you can run play action all day. If you are 2nd and 12, you really can't. And Aaron Jones always getting positive yards has been such a big benefit for the Vikings offense. The screen game you mentioned is terrific. The pass protection, he's done a really good job helping out with chips and things like that. Jones has just been a game changer. If he's not there this week, then it very likely will be the Sam Darnold 400 yard passing type of game against the Detroit Lions, because we've just seen that there's limitations to what Chandler can do. And I think that throughout history, we've seen a lot of really good number 2 running backs that came off the bench and were blazing fast and were just like track runners out there, where it's a nice change up to the starting running back and the guy comes in, he's super fast. You pitch him the ball a couple times, see what happens. That's Ty Chandler to me. And he can always prove differently, but just last week, and I know he got screwed out of a couple of runs that were called back on penalties, but it just wasn't very consistent with him. With Jones, it feels like this force where he is, if you will, imposing his will on the opponent, where it's just give the ball to Jones, positive play. Give the ball to Jones, positive play. With Chandler, there's a lot more zeros mixed in and then bigger boosts of rushing yards. And that's harder to plan around than it is with someone like Aaron Jones, who's almost always getting you between 3 and 10 or more yards on every single carry. It's rare that he doesn't get at least 3 or 4 yards on each time he's got the ball. And then there's also the versatility. You can line him up in different places. He he is a total game changer. And if they don't have him, it's going to be tougher going forward. I am with you in the idea that they need to search the running back market. And there's a few guys that could potentially be out there. They need to search the running back market for a trade to get another running back in here. Nathan says, just realized today there is actually a chance the whole division could go to the playoffs. Yeah, how wild is that? Because, the addition of that seventh playoff spot makes it, it's possible because you got the division winners and then the wild cards. And I mean, Chicago is the team that is the most suspect with this, right? Because, when it comes to a rookie quarterback, the season goes along, teams start to kind of game plan a little better. Some of the wins for Caleb Williams recently, not to downplay big wins for a team. You guys know that I don't do that. If you beat a bad team by 20 points, then that's a really good win in my book. But it is Carolina, it is Jacksonville. And with Caleb Williams soon having to face this division, we're talking about how hard it's going to be for the Lions. We're talking about how hard it's going to be for the Packers and for the Vikings, much more experienced teams. It's going to be really hard for Caleb Williams. That's the team that's the most suspect to make it. But when we go to the other divisions, I mean, Atlanta and Tampa Bay both have a shot. San Francisco and Seattle, I wouldn't completely dismiss for a playoff spot out there in the West. And I guess, are we counting out Dallas completely? Maybe we should after what just happened to them. I still think they have a lot of talent, and the Eagles and Washington are going to battle for that spot. But if every team finishes with 9 or 10 wins, then it could be the entire division representing the postseason. How crazy is that? And one of the things that's so interesting about the NFC North is when you go back and you look at 2022, the Vikings win 13 games. Look at the rest of the division. Total mess, really. The Lions win 9 after starting 1-6. The Green Bay Packers win 9, miss the playoffs. 9 or 8. Missed the playoffs in 2022. Chicago just completely tanks. Chicago at the end of the season is tanking their faces off at the end of the year. And they ultimately end up get the top draft pick. They trade it to the Carolina Panthers. That whole thing happens with Bryce Young. Just at that point, though, nobody is close to the Vikings. Then the Vikings take a step back. All those teams make gains. And now everybody is in their winning window all at once. We didn't think that everyone was going to be here. We thought the Packers, we thought the Lions. But now that Chicago is in the mix, now that the Vikings are 5-0, 4 teams in the same division in their winning windows at once is pure chaos. And I am here for the pure chaos. Blowfish says the home crowd will be more important than ever this week. Need to make the Lions live off the silent count and trust their offensive line to have multiple false starts. I don't think that they will have multiple false starts. The offensive line for the Lions is healthy and much better than the Texans was when it was here. And also these guys have all been there. All of them have played in US Bank Stadium. Maybe, I assume Kevin Zeitler has at some point, but he's a veteran. He's played in every venue. So Detroit has a ton of veteran talent who has been to US Bank Stadium before. Goff has been there a bunch of times. This isn't anything new for the Detroit Lions in general. Even if you look at their whole roster, they've all been here before. The intimidation factor is not eliminated, but it is mitigated versus what they face for some other teams. Where it can play a role is just, Jonathan Grenard is so quick off the line of scrimmage. I think it helps a little bit there with the silent counts where you could time it up a little bit better. And communication, even a very good offensive line can struggle with communication when they're facing off with Brian Flores and all the different things that he can do with the guys that he uses as loopers, edge rushers who come rushing up the middle, and the different things that he does as far as who is pressuring, who's dropping back. That is not easy to solve. That is a little bit sometimes baffling to offensive lines, no matter how experienced they actually are. But it is, when it comes to these division games, it's always been my experience that they're much closer than normal games. That teams who come to visit, like the Bears, although with Caleb Williams, it'll be a little different for him, but the Bears, the Packers, just like the Vikings going to Lambeau Field, it's a tough place to play, but it's not as tough for the Vikings as it is for other teams because they've gone there. They've been there. They're not in awe of it. They're not surprised by the noise or anything else like that. It's really just another place for them that they're kind of used to. They're not shocked. And I think that goes for Detroit, which should even the playing field a little bit, but it's still a big advantage of US Bank Stadium to use the noise against any team. I just think that if there is a team that can handle it the best in the entire NFL, it's probably Detroit. Let's see. Austin says, any clarification on what happened to Darnold when he went out for a play? He was noticeably worse after the hit. He didn't really have a lot of dropbacks before the hit, so that may have happened before, or anyway. It might have happened anyway, even if he hadn't taken that hit, that they might have gotten thrown off their game. I really felt, though, that the timing for him, because of the pressure and because of the physical play with Jefferson, there was a lot of plays where the timing was just off. We haven't seen an injury report yet for this week, and I'll see if Sam Darnold is on it. On Wednesday is when they have to put out their injury report. If Darnold is on it, then we'll know that that hit had some significance to him. I think it was just getting the wind knocked out of him, though, because he got hit really in the middle of his body and just kind of stayed down there in the same way if someone punched you in the stomach. But I'm sure that there's a psychological effect to taking a hit like that. You take a hit like that, it's going to throw off a little bit your nervousness of pressure coming in. And there were a couple of throws that I thought that Darnold rushed and didn't get his footwork right because maybe he was, pressured a little bit more himself, thinking that it was going to arrive. And then at other times it did. I mean, there were times where there was one play where Darisaw got beat. It was really the only one of the game, but it was a clean beat. There was, of course, a couple where the right guard got beat. There was even, I thought Blake Brandel had a tough game against the Jets. They're good. They were really good. So I don't know about as far as did he hurt his ribs? Did he break a rib or something like that? That's hard to say. If he's on the injury report, I guess we'll know. And sometimes stuff like that, as you guys saw from the quarterback documentary with Kirk, is not ever put out there. But I wouldn't assume that. I mean, I think it was just in general that the Jets defense did such a good job of pressuring him and being physical with the Vikings receivers that the whole thing threw stuff off. Let's see here. Yeah, a lot of suspicion about his ribs. I just don't know really what to say there because I don't know. I mean, it looked to me like he might have ended up hurting his ribs, but there were so many factors in that game. There was the defense, there was Jones being out, it was raining, it was in London. It was like everything kind of played into a bad game there. I think that against this defense that's not as good as the Jets and doesn't have its best player, and it's at US Bank Stadium, I think that it will be a different looking Sam Darnold when he returns this week. Mike says, who do you think has the best secondary in the NFC North? Top of my head, I would say that Chicago probably does. Brisker didn't play the other day. I think he's banged up, but Jalen Johnson, I think they have the best player of any team secondary wise. I was not blown away by the Packers. They were okay, but not particularly great. And when it comes to Detroit, Branch, Terry and Arnold's going to have to prove it, but he is very, very talented. And Carlton Davis is pretty good. They've really improved a lot there. So Detroit is close, I think, with Chicago. And the Vikings are right in that mix too. If Stephon Gilmore keeps playing this well and Shaq Griffin keeps playing this well, then they can stay in that mix for having one of the better secondaries, which we were very concerned about because you also like how good is Harrison Smith going to play and everything else. And he's been really terrific. Stephon Gilmore, though, is the swing player to the entire conversation because I think the Vikings do have an argument for the secondary who's played among the best. And the other thing is, too, that secondaries play off of the front seven. The front seven for the Vikings has been excellent. They're number 2 in pressure rate. And when that's the case, then it's a lot easier to play cornerback for the Vikings. Still, that said, I wouldn't be against them going out and trying to get another corner if they possibly could. That's going to be the one that I'm looking at. By the way, I am interested in your ideas. I'm working on an article of trade targets potentially for the Vikings because I think we're about there now where they could be on the phones. We saw a trade today with the Jaguars. They traded away a defensive tackle to Seattle. So the trades are going to start here and the Vikings could be in the mix. So I'm curious about your ideas, the names that you think the Vikings should investigate in potential trades. I got one that I want to throw by you guys and Manny. Maybe I'll just do it now and get your reaction. Would it be crazy? So I know the Bengals won. Would it be crazy, though, if the Bengals lost another game or two to try to trade for T. Higgins? Is that crazy? Like, they've been good. They've been so good with the receivers, and they're getting Hockenson back. So maybe that is crazy. But I kind of went, well, I mean, if you're all in, then you're all in, right? And, Addison has been great, but I don't think he's as good as Higgins for this career so far. Naylor has been great, but the same sort of deal. If someone gets banged up, and Naylor does have the history of being banged up, you're getting Hockenson back. There's not a lot of football to go around, but at the same time, the Vikings, you can see how much I'm kind of going back and forth on the idea. The Vikings are going to throw a million times a game. So maybe it's not bad to have more and more weapons. I don't know. I don't know if they should actually do that or not, but I'm curious about your potential trade targets. If you have any ideas, anybody in mind, who you think the Vikings should look for, because I'm making out this list. Let's see here. Blowfishes says Patrick Peterson has interest in returning to the Vikings. Would he really take a backup role as we can't complain about our starters this season? Did he say that somewhere? Did he say that in like a podcast or something that he has interest in coming back to the Vikings? I mean, who wouldn't at a 5-0 team? And Peterson was a really beloved player. I just don't know, though. I mean, he didn't play badly for Pittsburgh, but with them being healthy right now, and he has been out of the league, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it would be right to bring him back in. The other thing is, too, and there is a little bit of a dynamic that the team has kind of taken on its own group of leaders, and Patrick Peterson is a natural leader. Is he going to want to take on a leadership role that has already kind of been divvied up to other players? So one of those little dynamics you kind of think of. The system was also way different when he was here and when he had success. That was not the Brian Flores type of system. I mean, I would welcome Patrick Peterson back, and if they have any injuries, of course, that would make a lot of sense, but I'm not entirely sure that would be the best option as opposed to maybe some other guys that they could potentially get. All right, Manny Hill. Let's welcome in Manny Hill to the show. 5-0 Vikings, 4-1 Lions. And, because of the bye week, Manny, we get to spend all freaking week leading up to this one talking about the Vikings as the best team in football, face it off with the other best team in football, NFC North everywhere. It's a heck of a time to be alive, Mr. Hill.
It is. It really is. It's a great time to be a fan of sports. It's a great time to be a fan of football. We got baseball playoffs going on right now. I got both games happening tonight on my screen right in front of me. One to the left of you, one to the right of you. Juan Soto just hit a home run for the Yankees, and it looks like the Bills are trying to score a touchdown right now against the Jets. So I'm excited. I got all the sports juices flowing, and I can't wait for this Lions-Vikings game on Sunday.
Saturday, I spent probably 14 hours watching college football. And then Sunday, I had the Lynx game on with Red Zone on my computer. So you just watch, back and forth. So every game on the computer, WNBA finals on the TV.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. It doesn't get any better than this. The fact that the weather has also been really good is like, can we just stop right here? Just keep this, what we have at this moment. The hype for this game, Manny, is going to be great. Vikings and Detroit Lions leading up to it. And I was thinking earlier today, should we still have Manny pick the schedule? I mean, nothing changed for the Vikings, but the answer was absolutely yes, because so much changed around the National Football League. So I don't think we should waste any time, Manny Hill. Let's just get right into picking the Viking schedule. And we'll get back into answering your questions, your comments, your thoughts, and of course, your reactions to Manny's picks. And I was told last week, Manny, that I was being a little bit leading with some of my lead-ins to each game. Now, I know you were not influenced because you probably already made the picks, but I will instead give you the game reaction, and then I will react to your reaction, okay?
All right. That works for me.
Just so nobody thinks that I'm shading your opinions on the picks. Manny's a grown-up, folks. Okay, the Vikings are 5-0. They are playing the Detroit Lions, if you have not heard, on October 20th at US Bank Stadium. Let's start picking this Viking schedule with this Sunday's game. Who do you think wins?
I've been wavering on this game now for the last almost 24 hours now. You know, Aiden Hutchinson going down for the Lions is a massive, massive loss for their defense. He's their best. He's arguably their best overall player, but certainly their best player on the defensive side. And losing him is a huge, huge blow to that defense. And I think that can really work in the Vikings' favor. I do think that the Lions, though, at least on offense, are really clicking on all cylinders right now, as they showed against Dallas yesterday. I don't think that the Vikings are going to get blown out of the water the way the Cowboys did yesterday, because the Cowboys are just so banged up and beat up. I'm going to take the Lions winning a close one here at US Bank Stadium, but it's going to be a really, really fun, entertaining game.
So I think that before the Aiden Hutchinson injury, I would have said, okay, yeah, this is going to be pretty tough. That has to have a domino effect for them.
Yeah.
He is not just okay. They lost the best defensive player in the NFL, and they had handled some other guys pretty well. The Nick Bosa's and so forth. They had done a really good job against them, but this dude was on even another level from where those guys are playing. He looked like Reggie White out there over the first handful of weeks, and to have him gone, they don't really have other edge rushers. I think that might have moved the needle a little bit for me, but this is your pick the Vikings schedule. So 6-1. If I told you Aaron Jones was playing, would that change your mind? He's not. I'm not telling you that. I'm not sure yet. But is that shading your pick at all? His injury?
It is. It's influencing it a little bit, because we've talked all season about how important Aaron Jones really is to this offense, how big he is in the running game, screen game, how important he is for Sam Darnold as kind of a safety net in that short passing game. It really, his ability to run the ball kind of opened things up for everybody else, certainly for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and those guys too. So if the Vikings don't have Aaron Jones, I think it's going to be that much harder for the Vikings on Sunday.
I agree. These two factors may, if Aaron Jones plays, push me a little over the edge toward the Vikings. That may be the factor that influences my pick the most when we get to later in the week. So just a couple of days after losing, in your opinion, to Detroit, the Vikings will travel to the Los Angeles Rams, still as a 5-1 football team, to play a very banged up Rams team. Maybe they'll get a little healthier at that point, but still, it has been a tough time for the Los Angeles Rams. What say you about this game?
Yeah, I think the Vikings will bounce back for the loss to Detroit and go to Los Angeles. It'll be a short week, obviously, and a bit of ways to travel out to the West Coast, but I think they'll come away with a win. The Rams they're just banged up. They're just not playing very well right now. Matthew Stafford's kind of doing whatever he can at this point, but he just doesn't really have a lot to work with. And so I think that is going to leave things kind of ripe for the picking for Brian Flores and that defense. and I think the Vikings will come through with a win.
Okay, 6-1. Can you explain something to me, Manny? On September 22nd, the Vikings played the Houston Texans. They play Detroit on October 20th, and then only play one other home game until December 1st.
Yeah.
How the heck did this happen? Between September 22nd and December 1st, they will have played 2 times at US Bank Stadium. Like, what were they thinking here? I mean, I know you robbed them of the home game for London, but this seems completely unfair to the Vikings to be at home so rarely. So they go on the road. Well, they go back home for the other game that's here against Indianapolis. After that, at 6-1, I assume Anthony Richardson is playing quarterback. I also assume it's possible that as soon as Richardson picks up a football, he could be injured again, and it might be Joe Flacco at that point. That makes this game a little harder to pick, and that team has not been a joke. They've been in a lot of games, and they've won some games, but I don't know what to expect from Anthony Richardson, assuming that he is the starting quarterback here.
Yeah, if Anthony Richardson plays, and I think the last time I picked the schedule, I said this too. If Anthony Richardson plays, I think Brian Flores is going to have a field day because, and I'm still high on Anthony Richardson. I still think he has a chance to be really good, but he still has a lot of growth, a lot of development still in front of him that needs to happen. If it's Joe Flacco, then things could get, I think, really interesting because Flacco seems to, I don't know how he's doing it because he's 39 years old and he looked like he was cooked when he was playing for the Jets a couple of years ago, and then he comes back with the Browns and he does some stuff. And then this year, he's been playing pretty well for Indianapolis too. So I'm going to pick this game with the assumption that Anthony Richardson is going to play because I think because he's a part of their future, they want him to play. They want him to be healthy. So when he is healthy and ready to play, they are going to put him out there. So I'm going to assume that he is going to be ready to play and that the Vikings will come away with a win on November 3rd.
Okay, so now they are a 7-1 football team facing 2 teams that are absolute laughingstocks in back-to-back weeks. The Jaguars, there is no way Doug Peterson continues to coach the Jacksonville Jaguars by the time the Vikings face them on November 10th. Vikings at Jaguars, what's your pick?
This is a win. I think this is a win. Depending on, Doug Peterson might get fired next week because they got another London game next week, right? They're staying over there in London.
Yes.
So,
which is probably the only reason he's not fired yet.
Right. So if they lose again this coming week, he's going to be fired and they're going to have a new guy in there. And I think by this time, November 10th, I think sort of the honeymoon, the extra jolt of energy with the new interim coach, I think will have kind of worn off a little bit, and they'll go back to being the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are an absolute mess. And so I will take the Vikings to win in Jacksonville.
So if I'm not mistaken, that puts them at 8-1 to start the 2024 season, matching what they did in 2022, Manny. When they went 8-1 to start that year. And the game that they got their 8th win was against the Bills. And then things started to come apart at the seams, but I don't know if that's going to be the case here because after going to Jacksonville and getting a win, they then go to Tennessee where they will play, I guess, Will Levis. There's some quarterbacks in this league, Manny, Deshaun Watson, Will Levis, where you go, yeah, really? You're staying with that, huh? I mean, Watson's the worst ever, but I mean, Levis has looked almost just as bad as Deshaun Watson this year when he's not running over sound guys that they have to take away on the cart. If you saw that, he's throwing crazy interceptions, but he also doesn't create a lot of explosive plays. That is one where we will be talking about how Kevin O'Connell evaluated Will Levis, had a chance to draft Will Levis and said, nah, I'm good, and made the right call. So anyway, Vikings and Titans. And remember, Manny, at some point, it's the rules, and you don't have to do it here. There has to be a letdown game at some point on this schedule. So they are 8-1. Is this it?
No.
Okay. 9-1.
No. Yeah, they're 9-1. Will Levis just stinks. And I keep thinking like, all right, the next game Will Levis is going to pick it up and he's going to play a little bit better, but he just seems to get worse and worse by the week. And this is going to be another win for the Vikings that move them to 9-1.
Whoa. 9-1 headed to Soldier Field to face Caleb Williams. Now, the thing is, I don't even know if this could qualify as your letdown game because
right.
Chicago might be good at this point, though they're going to have to beat someone a little better than they have beaten throughout the season so far. The difference maker, though, is their defense is pretty darn legit. Their playmakers are starting to come alive. Chicago's been looking pretty good. Vikings at Soldier Field as a 9-1 football team. Holy cow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've been pretty consistent all the times I've been picking the schedule of putting this down as a loss. And I think I'm going to stick with that this week as well. It's just a tough place to play, Soldier Field. I think the Bears are pretty good, and Caleb Williams is starting to play better, starting to build some confidence, and you can start to see some of the development with him. I do agree with you. Like, it would be nice to see, a little bit more from them against, a higher quality opponent, and the Vikings might be that opponent. Who knows? But I will put this down as a loss just because it's Soldier Field and the Vikings typically just have trouble there. And I think the Bears are a pretty formidable opponent this year.
I can just feel the comment section's rage every time you pick a loss, but this moves them to 9-2.
Yeah. They're not going to go 17-0, folks. That's just not going to happen.
You don't know that. You don't know that, Manny. You can't prove that they won't go 17-0. But that does not count as your letdown game. It does count as one hell of an exciting game, though, because that one will be on national TV, which I think that they likely put it as national TV to start the season because of Caleb Williams, and now it might be because of the Minnesota Vikings. 9-2 going out to Seattle, who has been a...
No, you're
I'm sorry. Ahead. I'm sorry. I saw the other Chicago. Arizona, yep. December 1st, home against Arizona at 9-2.
Yeah, I was feeling pretty good about Arizona, and then yesterday they kind of laid an egg in Green Bay, and I don't know what that was about. I'll put this down as a win for the Vikings. That the Cardinals are still just kind of tricky, though. I don't really. There are times where they look really, really good, but there are other times like yesterday or like what they had against Washington a couple of weeks ago where they just look abysmal, and you're like, what's going on there? So, for now, I will put that down as a win at US Bank Stadium.
You know what I think it is? It is mediocrity. That is what it is. When you are just a meh team, and they're going in the right direction overall. They also lost Marvin Harrison yesterday to an injury, which is tough. But when you're middling, sometimes if you're the Vikings and you're middling, you play every game to a 3-point win or loss for 3 straight years. But I think a lot of other teams that are middling, they just 1 week they're great and 1 week they're terrible, and you never really know what is going to happen there. So it could be either version. I lean toward, though, that Arizona team just cannot match up with the Vikings, and they might be in a little bit of a tough spot by the time they face them. So that makes them 10-2. And guess who is coming to US Bank Stadium on December 8th? The return of Kirk Cousins, who has suddenly come alive as a Falcon. Caw-caw! And finding his weapons. Still not moving at all in the pocket whatsoever, but their running game, caw-caw, has gotten a lot better. Kyle Pitts, caw-caw, is actually playing okay. The viewership just shot through the roof the more I cawed, so I decided to keep doing it. Do you think they win? December 8th? Atlanta?
Yes, I do think the Vikings win this game. There's going to be so much drama, storylines, all that stuff with Kirk Cousins coming back to US Bank Stadium. The thing is with the Falcons, they've played almost all of their games really close, and the one game that they have won by more than one possession was yesterday against one of the worst teams in the league, the Carolina Panthers, where they won by 18. And even like early in that game, it was still kind of close, and Carolina was kind of hanging around a little bit. This is just kind of Kirk Cousins in a nutshell. I don't I'm not sure how good the Falcons actually are. I know Kirk is playing well and the numbers are there, but they haven't really beaten anybody and looked super impressive
Mhm.
in the process. I mean, they beat Carolina yesterday, but it's a bad team. I'm talking about like good teams, good quality teams. They haven't really done that as of yet. But they're 4-2, so there is some quality football being played there. I will put the Vikings down as winners here. I think it'll be close just because that's what Kirk Cousins does.
Obviously.
He'll
Yes.
have the ball. I think Kirk will have the ball with a chance to drive down and maybe win the game, but he'll come up short, and the Vikings will hold on and win.
That sounds familiar somehow. I
Yeah.
don't know. They should be 2-4 because they had something like a 1% chance to beat the Eagles, and they did, and
Yep.
like a 1% chance to beat the Bucks, and they did. It's only in Kirk fashion that he could be set up in this situation after having really 4 games they should have lost, but somehow he pulled some magic out of a hat. But you're right. The only impressive game they've played all year is yesterday. He did throw for 500 yards in that Bucks game, but they were losing most of the time, and we kind of know about that a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay, so the Vikings are now 11-2 and playing
Whew.
Chicago on December 16th. Is that a win or a loss against Chicago at home December 16th as an 11-2 football team?
I will put this down as a win for the Vikings as they avenge the loss from 3 weeks prior. They'll be at home. They'll have the home crowd behind them, and I think they'll put on a better performance and they'll bounce back and get a win in a close game against the pretty good Chicago Bears.
Yes, and this is the Monday night game that will have all the juice. I was looking ahead at the schedule earlier, but yes, this one, Caleb Williams, Monday Night Football, the brightest lights, but also the loudest version of US Bank Stadium you will ever find. And I think that a rookie quarterback in that environment trying to diagnose what Brian Flores is throwing at him is going to be almost impossible. So I like this pick. You are now obligated by the laws of Manny picks the schedule to pick a loss for the Seattle Seahawks game to make
Yeah.
them 12-3. You have to have a letdown game. And now officially you get to use this because Seattle, I don't know what has happened to their defense. They traded for a defensive tackle who's not all that good. They are just not a very good football team on that side. And the Geno Smith thing is funny. So is Trevor Lawrence. Sometimes I am amazed by the way, and I'm just going to rant about this because you're not picking this game. It's a loss. It has to be by the rules. But
I was going to pick it as a loss anyway.
one thing I just don't fully understand, though, about quarterback analysis is when people are obsessed with arms and not so much with the bigger picture of a quarterback. So with Trevor Lawrence, at some point we have to admit Trevor Lawrence just isn't that good. He's just not. He just never has been. And until he is, I can't say that he's a good quarterback. And them paying him, of course they had to, but put him up against Sam Darnold and their careers, tell me where it's so much better than what Sam Darnold ever was. That doesn't mean at another franchise that he might not have been better, but the guy is not accurate. I don't like his decision making. He throws a lot of picks. He's just, I don't know, just kind of a mess. And I think with Geno Smith, he's better than that, but he's also a 500 type of quarterback, even at his best, for a reason, because there are weaknesses there with the decision making, with throwing into traffic sometimes, with long stretches where he's not that good, that have cropped up over the last couple of years where I don't think this is an elite quarterback. And still, we have to put it down as a loss because the Vikings will have one of those at some point to make them 12-3. But I'm not impressed by the new coach. And I don't think that Geno's a long-term option for Seattle. So there's a Seattle take. Now, Green Bay comes to US Bank Stadium, proving they are still allowed to have games at US Bank Stadium in the same month, of which, gosh, December, I'm going to be going to that venue a lot. December 1st, December 8th, December 16th, and December 29th. I'm going to just put up a cot there in the press box at US Bank Stadium for December. as the Vikings face the Packers at 12-3. Real quick, what's the Packers record? 12-3 Vikings versus the what? Packers.
I think the Packers will be 10-5.
I like that. I like that pick. Who wins?
I will pick the Packers to win.
Oh, you had to do it.
I had to do it.
12-4. So now,
it's a good record.
It's a great record.
It's
a great record. I could just feel the seething with anger from the comments, but I get it. I've always had this rule picking the schedule that I split the division games. Just 3-3. You never really know. Sometimes they win one more. Sometimes they lose one more. I always go like that. And it makes sense to do that. And that's what you've done here so far. But are you picking a 13th win at Ford Field in the final week of the season, which now really looks like it could be for the conference, Manny?
Yep. And I'm going to pick the Vikings to win.
Oh, there it is. 13 wins. He has risen the bar from 12 wins last week. The Vikings didn't even play to now 13 wins. The high water mark of Manny picks the schedule. Circle the date. This was the day that Manny picked the Vikings to win 13. Whew.
You know, it's interesting with the divisional games too, because I just look at all four teams in this division. They all seem to be too good to get swept by any of the other three teams in the division.
Yeah. Yep. I agree with that.
They're all really good. It's like I can't really imagine the Vikings beating the Packers twice this year. They've already got the win at Lambeau. You know, not saying it's impossible, obviously, but I just feel like all four of these teams are too good, and these four teams know each other so well that they're going to kind of beat up on each other a little bit, and this division is going to be really tight. I mean, the Bears might finish in last place in this division, and they might win 10 games. They might win 10 games.
That is my follow-up, though, for you, Manny. My follow-up is give me the order and the wins for every NFC North team. This is a new addition to Manny Picks the Schedule, and then we will get to your questions and comments. So jump in, throw some more questions and reactions to Manny's 13-win season that he has just projected. But what is your NFC North projection?
All right, so I have the Vikings winning week 17 at Detroit, putting them at 13-4. I have them as winning the NFC North. I have the Lions right behind them at 12-5. I've got the Packers at 11-6, and I've got the Bears. I'll put the Bears at 9-8. Finishing in
I was thinking just about the same thing. The Packers, I think, can be the most inconsistent team of this group. That with the Lions, they have so much talent, even without Aiden Hutchinson. There's so much talent on offense there that I just don't see them stumbling too often. The biggest variance here, earmuffs everybody who doesn't want to hear it. The biggest variance here is the Vikings when you're making this pick because of who is playing quarterback. And I think that Sam Darnold has been tremendous and has a great chance to repeat everything that he's done in these first 5 games. But if he hits some stumbling blocks for any stretch of games, if there are 3 shockingly, stunningly bad games that we can't explain or understand, then they won't win 13. It'll be more like 11. And then likely someone else is at the top instead of you. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying it's possible. Even when you look back at 2021 Matthew Stafford, remember the 3-game stretch where they lost, he struggled. He came to US Bank Stadium and threw like 3 picks and a win against the Vikings in 2021. I think that Darnold is kind of a light version of Matthew Stafford, where he throws the ball all over the place. He's going to take risks, but he's also going to absolutely wow you at times with his arm talent. That is the biggest question. But the thing is, when you start 5-0 and then you play the AFC South 3 times in a row, with all those teams kind of being a disaster, then you got a pretty good chance to kind of have a bad stretch and still win something like 12 or 13 games. So, well, great work picking the schedule. Let's get back to answering some questions now. Mike says, fantasy question, will TJ Hockenson be on your roster on his week one return when he first comes back? So, by the way, my expectation here, I would be absolutely shocked if he plays this week. I don't think that's going to happen. An ACL injury needs more than just a couple of days of practice to play in an NFL game. I also think that they don't really want him playing against Kirby Joseph and trying to go kill him. So that could be another element. But I really think that this injury is one that you need to take slowly. I'm looking at Thursday night against the Rams for him to play in some sort of role. And then the following week, there's that long break for him to play against Indianapolis. But Manny, in your opinion, how big is, and actually this reminds me, there's another news item we have to talk about that I should have started the show with. How big is TJ Hockenson to Sam Darnold sustaining that success?
Huge. Absolutely huge. I think when you're looking at, because we've kind of talked about, can we see Sam Darnold start to, throw the ball underneath at times instead of just, chucking it 50 yards down the field all the time on play action? Can they utilize a screen game with Aaron Jones, and can they kind of get some of those short to intermediate routes with TJ Hockenson going once he comes back? I think that's going to be absolutely huge. If Hockenson comes back and he's healthy and he picks up kind of where he left off last year, which he was having a really good year before he got hurt, I think that's going to be astronomically huge for Sam Darnold's success. Because I think we kind of saw in that Jets game that, forcing the ball down the field, not really looking at some of the intermediate stuff, some of the safer throws. Sometimes it's okay to take those. We would get on Kirk's case sometimes for taking those passes too much, but I think having a good balance and taking those passes when they're there, I think will be huge. And I think once CJ Hockenson comes back, those types of situations will be a lot more available to Sam Darnold, and I think it'll be huge for Darnold to continue to play well.
So the news today was that Dalton Risner and his window is now open to practice as he returns from an injury. And I think that the minute he's really 100% ready to go, he should start at right guard.
Yep.
It's just over for me. There's no more development, wishing, hoping, praying. You need somebody who can pass protect. Too many plays have been blown up. And I get it. Ingram is very physical in the run game, but look who we're talking about here. We're talking about Kevin O'Connell, pass first offense. There just needs to be better pass protection, and you can't lose immediately. You can't have these mental mistakes where you're just not blocking the right person. That seems to happen sometimes. Just dudes flying by him where he lunges. It's the same mistakes that he made as a rookie. They have not changed. And as a rookie, I thought they should bench him for somebody else. They never did it. And then last year, I thought at times they should bench him, and maybe he made a little progress. But then at the end of the year, he still ends up with some of the worst numbers in the league. And this year, the patience, the development, hey, you're going to have to give him more time. I'm finished. I don't need to see any more. Risner can start as soon as he comes back. He's a proven great pass protector. I'll work around the run part of it. I need Sam Darnold to have a very clean pocket. And Risner was great last year as a pass protector. I'm going to so much more lean toward that.
Yeah, no, I'm 1,000% with you. And I mean, we've seen Sam Darnold get a little bit nicked up in the last few weeks where, he's getting brought down and like knees twisting and he's getting hit, in different situations. And you just need that pocket to be, like you said, as clean as possible. You can't mess around with this anymore. As soon as Risner is ready, he needs to be in there starting at the right guard. I'm not as worried about the running game because I think Aaron Jones, provided that he's healthy, is good enough to maybe overcome some of the shortcomings from Dalton Risner in the run game. So I think that the time is now. As soon as Risner is ready, he's got to be the guy. You just can't afford to mess around with this anymore, especially now, knowing what we know about this team now, getting off to this good start. This is the perspective on this team has really changed now with them being in first place and getting off to this good start. Now we're talking about getting to the playoffs, winning this division, making some noise in the playoffs, maybe a run to the NFC Championship game. And if that's the goal now for this season, you can't mess around with it. There's no more time for developing the young right guard. This is year 3 for him. We're not seeing a lot of progress. It's time to put Dalton Risner in there when he's ready.
Rob says, do you think Aaron Jones is going to be good to go this week? And could KOC be playing the questionable game up until game day? I mean, I don't really know how severe the injury is. I do think when you get the opportunity to play that game with the other team, that you should take it. If you're in a position to be like, we don't know, he got banged up last week, I guess we'll see. But I do think it was probably legit, because he couldn't go back in and looked very stiff, and he just has this history of injuries. So it might be a serious, actual questionable. They need him to play, and they need at least him to play half the game, even if he could just go in for a couple of reps. This is a big one. On the other side of that, gosh, I mean, it's a long season, and you need Aaron Jones for the whole season. So I'm of two minds of this. Like, if he's close, should you just play him some so the other team knows that he's there and has to pay attention to it? And even if you play Ty Chandler more, you still have Aaron Jones for the big moments that you could put him in. Or do you just say, well, look, you got to make sure that he plays for the entire season, because they're looking at a 12 or 13 win season here that they're aiming for. I don't know. I think that's a tough one, Manny. They really do need him to play. But also they could go out and try to get another running back in the trade market. Thing is, if he doesn't play, though, it's Myles Gaskin as the backup running back and CJ Ham, and that's it. They don't have anybody else. That's pretty hard to work with if you're the Vikings without Aaron Jones right now.
And this is a team in the Detroit Lions where, for as good as the Vikings defense has been, and they've been fantastic, this is an offense in Detroit that can put a lot of points on the board. And this is going to be a game where, I don't think that you can really rely on Brian Flores' defense to just completely shut down the other team's offense and hold them to 13 or 17 points. I mean, it's possible the Lions are going to get, 20 plus, maybe even closer to 30 points in this game. You're going to need to be able to put some points on the board. And your best way of doing that is with Aaron Jones on the field. Now, how much you're able to use him, we might find out, but I think it's going to be really important for him to be out there. If he's out there and it's not working, or if he's not feeling right, then obviously you pull him out of the game and you just take your chances with Ty Chandler and Myles Gaskin. But I think the idea should be, let's try and get Aaron Jones out there in the field, see if he's healthy as possible, and then, give ourselves the best chance to win. That, I think, has to be the mindset for the Vikings for this game.
Alex says, is it time to raid the Cowboys for some players? I don't think the Cowboys are trading anybody. They are not tanking. They're not playing for next year.
They don't have anybody healthy.
Well, that's true. But that's just not a team who does that. I mean, if you're the Jaguars, you lose one more game, you're trading everything that's not nailed down. Clearly, the guy, I didn't think of this. They traded a guy who has to fly from London to Seattle. That's a nightmare for him. But obviously the Jaguars have started that process already, and I imagine several teams have. The Dallas Cowboys are going to fight until it's completely over, because they just have no other choice. Mike Zimmer is lucky, though, to have a job today, because injuries or not, 47 points is a lot of points. Digits, I'm concerned with the Vikings losing effectiveness via exhaustion if they do not get time of possession under control. I wholeheartedly agree, Manny. I think that they have been on the field just too much as a defense, and they have a lot of players who have had some injury histories before, who have not played this many snaps either recently or ever. And it does have to be a concern that this Vikings offense has been quick strike, but has not been slow churn, long drives. And I know that's not O'Connell's style, but they do have to flip a switch there at some point, or the defense is going to get worn down because they now have 2 games in a row.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe why, the bye week kind of came when it did, like why it was important for the bye week to come when it did. Because if you go back to the London game with the Jets, between that game and after the Los Angeles game, the November 3rd in Indianapolis, or at home against Indianapolis, you've basically played 2 games in the stretch of about a month. So I think the way this schedule is going, and I know that it's going to get tough because they're going to have 3 straight road games after that, but I think, the 2 games are going to be really close together on a short week. But I think the fact that you're only playing 2 games in the span of about a 4-week stretch, I think can be really helpful. I think coming off the bye, if it seems like the Vikings defense should be a little bit fresh, a little bit rested. But yeah, I mean, I think this is where this goes back to the complementary football stuff we always talk about. Like, this is where you look at the offense and say, all right, KOC, I know you want to hit the big plays. I know you want to do the play action and deep pass to Jefferson, deep passes to Addison. But, you can establish a run game, a quick, short passing game, short, intermediate routes, screen game. Again, screen game. We talked about the screen game over and over again. That's going to help you sort of maintain drives and pick up first downs to where it's not, 3 and 4 play drives, 9 and 10 play drives that take 5-6 minutes off the clock. That can really actually help your defense rest a little bit so that they don't get worn down late in games.
Well, let's see. Mike says, I think if we are shopping offense at the deadline, guard, center, or running back has to take priority. So I threw it out there, Manny, about T. Higgins. I don't think the Bengals are going to trade him. I think they're also in for the long haul. I don't think they're in teardown mode. They're going to play until they're eliminated from the playoffs. But I couldn't help myself but think about, Addison has, been pretty good, but Jefferson and T. Higgins, you can never have too many. And then, of course, unsurprisingly, the Adam Thielen suggestion arrives, but he's dealing with a serious hamstring injury, so I don't think that's a very good idea. Now, Chuba Hubbard from Carolina is David's idea, but I don't know if they're going to give him up. He's really good, and that team is going to want to win eventually. But with running backs, if you hang on to them too long, they will kind of run out of steam at some point. That might be an interesting one. I brought up Miles Sanders because he just doesn't play, with Chuba Hubbard being as good as he is. But running back is the most robust for a potential trade. I just think that that's the position with the most number of guys that they could go after in the trade market without having to give up their first round pick. Comment on that and this one, because I like it. Clifford says trade idea, defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons from Tennessee. Again, I don't know if that team's looking to trade one of the best players in the league who's not that old, but he's very expensive. They tried to spend some money in the offseason and totally flopped as a team. So those two ideas, a very good running back or going all in, because you have to give him first round pick for sure to get Jeffrey Simmons.
Yeah, I like both players. I mean, Simmons is fantastic. I do, you know, I feel like the running back. I mean, you could use both positions. Obviously, you could use some help from both positions. I feel like the running back thing though is maybe a little bit more important, just because of maybe the uncertain health of Aaron Jones, and just you don't really have a lot of depth there outside of Ty Chandler as a backup. And so, and again, I'm not sure that Ty Chandler is a guy that can really, if Aaron Jones has to miss significant time, if he has to miss, 3 games in a row, I'm not sure Ty Chandler, is able to really sort of carry that load and carry that responsibility of being the number one back, a number one feature back. And I think it's a huge drop off after him down to Myles Gaskin. So that position to me I think is absolutely huge. We've talked about almost ad nauseum how important Aaron Jones is to the offense. I think really any running back that can be, an Aaron Jones light, I think could really help this offense. And if you don't have that guy, I think it's just going to make things that much harder for Sam Darnold. If you can get, if you could get Simmons from Tennessee, then I'd say do it, because that would just strengthen an already really, really, really good defense. But I think running back for sure has to be like priority number one when you get close to the trade deadline.
I think so too. Of course, Dexter Lawrence gets brought up in this, and yeah, it's like, do you want one of the best players in the NFL at a position that's really important? Yes, of course you do. Would they actually do it is another part of the conversation. But if you are the Tennessee Titans, you've just kind of changed leadership at the head coach position. Maybe you're looking a little farther down the road and saying, you're putting so much money into this one guy and he doesn't want to be here. I don't know how he feels. I'm just saying that's possible that he doesn't want to be here. But otherwise, I don't really see a reason why they would trade him. Teams rise and fall all the time, and he's not that old. He's extremely good, but I'd throw him on any trade target list just from the sheer possibility that he could be that guy. Is the Faithful says, if they beat the Lions, I don't want to hear prove it game for a long time. This year, every game in the North is going to be a prove it game because of how good the competition is, but fair enough. This game, Manny, and I think they have proven it. I think when you get to 5-0, when you have the best point differential in the league, you've proven that you are a serious Super Bowl contender at 5-0 with that point differential. The thing about beating Detroit is that so let's say right now you're kind of hovering around in this atmosphere with several other NFC teams. Oh, there goes the Packers. They're floating with you a little bit. They're a little below you because you beat them. And here's the Lions. They've just floated up because they've been killing people, and you're a little above them. But if you beat the Lions, you float to the top. And there's not even a discussion of who the best team in the NFC is if you beat the Lions. It's you. And I think that's what the prove it is. Like, prove it can mean numerous different things every game. Like, prove it against the Packers was, hey, go show us that you are a Super Bowl contender. I didn't think that London was prove it. London was more like just survive it than it was prove it. So the last prove it was against Green Bay. Now it's a different version of that. After you go 4-0, all right, this team's pretty for real. But you go to 6-0 and 2 wins in the toughest division in football, you are the best team in the NFC. No debate. No FPI, no power rankings, no whatever anybody could put without the Minnesota Vikings at the top of the NFC.
100%. And you look at around the rest of the conference, all the other teams are there. There's major question marks. And, on the Vikings, the big question mark for the Vikings going forward the rest of the season is like, can Sam Darnold sort of maintain this level of play? But I don't think there's really any question marks about, the defense. I think with the defense, it's just stay healthy and the defense should be fine. You look around the rest of the conference, I think what Washington has done so far is pretty impressive. I don't know if I like what they have on defense. But Jaden Daniels is playing really well, and they went toe-to-toe with a pretty good Baltimore team yesterday. The rest of that division, Philly doesn't look very good. Dallas is a mess. The Giants aren't even in the conversation. Yeah, the South is, you got Atlanta and Tampa Bay, but do we have either one of those teams really scare you right now? No. San Francisco has been the class of the conference for the last 5 years, but they're banged up and dealing with some serious injuries, and there's really nobody else in that division that I think could stand out either. So it's the Vikings in Detroit right now, and Green Bay's right there, and Chicago's been, plucky and kind of a nuisance, and a team that has some talent too, especially on the defensive side. So if you're the Vikings, you take care of business against the Lions. It is you at the top of the NFC, and you are looking down at everybody else, and you're saying, "Get at me, dog. Let's go." So this is going to be a huge, huge, huge game on Sunday.
Intrepid Fool says Lions might win, but let's not hype them too much. They aren't better than the Texans. I think the Vikings win a close one to stay unbeaten. I do think that they're better than the Texans as a complete team. The Texans have one of the great quarterbacks in the league. They're good. I mean, I picked the Texans to go to the Super Bowl on the AFC side, so I think the Texans are fantastic. Here's where it's different. CJ Stroud had never come here before. Jared Goff has come here numerous times and beat this team and put up huge performances. And even when he was facing Brian Flores' defense last year, was still pretty good in that building in US Bank Stadium. The other thing is, here's what I don't get, Manny. I've gotten this sense over the last 2 days. There is some worry from Vikings fans or some annoyance at us talking about me last night, us now, talking about how good the Lions are. What are you afraid of? I don't know why you'd be concerned with, and by the way, it's the truth. They're that good. They have just annihilated their last 2 opponents. They have had a top 5 offense for, is this the 3rd year in a row now? Top 5 offense. This is probably the best version of that top 5 offense from a roster perspective. Would they have multiple good receivers, multiple running backs, elite offensive line, quarterback who's been to the Super Bowl, one of the best offensive play callers in football, a vastly improved defense without Aiden Hutchinson. But your team is 5-0. Like, you don't need to do that anymore. You could say, all right, roll the ball out. 2 great teams. Let's see them play. You don't have to be the ones like, well, they're not that good. We might be able to beat them. You don't have to be that way. You can admit that they're that good. They have Super Bowl expectations. So do you. That's what makes this football game great. I don't think that Vikings fans should be backing away or saying, well, the Lions aren't there. They are, dude. They are. They were in the NFC Championship last year. They're great. But your team should be able to play right there with them.
And I think also we need to kind of shake, because I think part of this is I think some people are still having a hard time coming to grips with the Lions being good because they've just been terrible for so long. But this is not Marty Mornhinweg's Detroit Lions, folks. I think they showed that last year. They were on the doorstep. They had a double-digit lead in the NFC Championship game against the 49ers. They were on the road. I mean, they have the Niners on the ropes, on their way. The Lions were on their way to the Super Bowl last year. And they just came up a little bit short, and they've got just about everybody back from that roster. All of those young players that they had that kind of emerged last year, they're a year older and a year better. Jared Goff is a year better. Jared Goff is, he's really kind of in the middle of his prime now. He's 29, 30 years old, playing his best football of his career. And this is a guy that already took a team to the Super Bowl once. So they are a serious football team. They're very good. Now, losing Aiden Hutchinson is massive. That's a massive blow to their defense, and I think that can work in the Vikings' favor on Sunday. But when you look at what they have on offense, that is a serious championship level team. And like you said, we don't have to like assume that they're just not that good, because they are very, very good. And this is going to be like, I'm so excited for this game because there's so much riding on it. And I just can't wait, because this is a quality opponent. This is an opportunity for the Vikings that if they win this game, they can really grab a hold of this division, take command of this division, and really take command of the entire conference.
I feel like this is, and maybe not quite as physical, but sort of reminiscent of the Ravens and the Steelers for a few years, where these last couple years, the Vikings and the Lions have played these crazed offensive wild games. And I don't know if that's going to be that or if it's going to be kind of knock down, drag out, but there's already been some down to the wire, last play, last drive type of games that the Steelers and Ravens always seem to play against each other. And that feels kind of the same way. And I don't think that if you were the Roethlisberger Steelers, that you had to go, oh yeah, well, the Ravens, they're overrated. That Ray Lewis, what does he even do out there? Just dance around? No, like Ray Lewis was amazing. You can say that. That's great. If you could go toe to toe with teams that were in the NFC Championship and are 4-1 and just beat someone 47-9, and you're saying, I think the Vikings, and your team is favored, by the way, I mean, that says a lot about where you're at. You don't have to worry about them being good. Andrew says, anybody throw out Chase Young as an option for a trade? He's on a 1-year deal with the Saints, only 25. It's crazy. He's only 25. I don't mind that. I do wonder about the Saints. Are they going to pack it in or not? There's so much when it comes to certain organizations, like with the Cowboys, with the Saints. I think these are teams that just won't give up, that will just keep fighting. They're not in a position like the Titans, like the Jaguars, where they could just be like, we're beat. It's okay. They are going to be a little bit more stubborn. And I think jobs are on the line in New Orleans, which always makes a difference. Same thing with Dallas. When jobs are on the line, I don't think it's as easy to just be like, oh, well, okay, they're going to trade people. Would I be interested though? I'm curious about him as a dude. I don't really have a good feeling for how he would fit in the culture, but as far as he went to San Francisco last year, he was a contributor. If he was a third down pass rusher only for this team, and he could give a little bit of a rest to Jonathan Grenard, could rush over the middle. Like, yeah, I mean, more rushers is always good. We've learned that from the Eagles. We've learned that from the 49ers. That's a position that I wouldn't underrate the Vikings looking at, even though they're good at edge rusher. Like, the more the merrier with that position.
Yeah, 100%. And, listen, you do have to sometimes when you're having a season like this, sometimes you have to account for guys getting injured. I mean, 2017 was, that was kind of a magical year and everything kind of went right for the Vikings until that January day in Philadelphia. Where, everybody just, especially on the defensive side, everybody just stayed healthy. And everybody was as healthy as possible, and that really allowed for that defense to continue to play well for the rest of the season. But you're not guaranteed, the health of any of these guys on the defensive side, especially. And they've got some depth at edge with Van Ginkel and Grenard, and Patrick Jones has kind of emerged and been a contributor. But you can never really have enough of those guys. Because what happens if Andrew Van Ginkel gets hurt? What happens if Jonathan Grenard gets hurt? Dallas Turner's been a little bit banged up, but do you want to rely on him to step in as a rookie and be a huge contributor? So far, he really hasn't been. I don't think you can really have enough guys at that position. And so I think if you can get somebody like a Chase Young for, a low-level draft pick, I think you can make it happen and see what happens from there on out.
Yeah, I'm interested in that position just because the rotations are so effective.
Yeah.
If you have guys with 600 snaps and you have 4 of them, then you're in really great shape. I don't know also how they think Dallas Turner is going to develop here. I've gotten a few questions over the last few days about Dallas Turner. It's like, who was he going to take the place of? Even Jihad Ward has played really well. There's a lot of veterans in front of him. It's okay if we don't shove rookies right into the fire. That's what good teams do, is not have to throw rookies into these positions where they're in over their head. But I don't know is he going to, by the midway through the season, be more of a contributor or not? Or for this year, when you're all in, you just let him develop for a year. He was one of the younger draft picks this year. So if you got to do that for a 5th round pick or something, if they were willing to give you Chase Young, then yeah, that's not quite the big game hunting that I've been thinking of with this team at the trade deadline, but it's a clever idea. I don't mind it. Enigma 1 says, not sold on the Bears, no wins over legitimate competition yet. Here's the thing about this whole competition deal. When we talk about, well, this team hasn't beaten that team and that team hasn't beaten that team, and et cetera. There's a lot of bad teams in the league. There's 32, and probably, I'm going to guess, let's take a look at the Bears schedule. I'm going to guess they play more of them. Now, I'm with you, Manny, where I think they're more of a 9-8 type of team, But they play Washington, who's obviously good. Arizona's not that good. New England's not that good. Then Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, San Fran, Minnesota. Whoa. Okay. Here is a good point. This is why I wanted to cross check. What does their future schedule look like? Let me read that again for the Chicago Bears. They will play Washington, Arizona, New England. Okay. They can win 2 out of 3 there. Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, at San Fran, Minnesota, Detroit, Seattle, Green Bay. I don't think that's the team that's making the playoffs out of the NFC North. Not with that schedule left. There's way too many good teams, way too many NFC North teams for Chicago. They're going to have to be really good in order to end up making the playoffs. I was not aware of that until just now. That's quite a run that Chicago has to go on there.
Yeah. That is, they've kind of, the Bears have, everybody in this division is going to have that stretch of they're playing the AFC South. And, so they're playing Indianapolis, they're playing Jacksonville. And they're playing the Titans. I mean, Houston's obviously very good. The Bears have already kind of done that part of their schedule. They beat the Titans, they lost to the Texans, they lost to the Colts, and they just beat Jacksonville. So
right.
All of the sort of the cupcake portion of their schedule of the AFC South they've already done it. And now you look ahead with the Vikings. You look at the Vikings and the Lions schedule. The Vikings and Lions they're pretty much playing a lot of the same teams now over the next, 6-7 weeks. So they're going to start playing a lot of those AFC South teams. So it's going to be tough sledding for the Bears. I think they'll be in the conversation for maybe a wild card spot, but I think it's going to be really, really tough. That's a murderer's row of a schedule. I mean, what is San Francisco going to look like on December 8th when the Bears have to go out there? Are they going to be Are the Niners going to be healthy by then? If they are, that's probably going to be a loss for the Bears. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm now thinking the Bears are more of an 8-win type of team than, 9 is fair. 8 would be a good season for them. They do have a good defense, and they're going to battle each week. Caleb's going to keep getting better, but that's a murderer's row right there after the next couple of weeks. If they win 2 out of 3 against Arizona and New England, that would get them to 6 wins, and they would only need 3 more the rest of the way to get to 9. So, yeah, that's still very possible. They've put themselves ahead, but I did not realize how they have all their tough games still to go. Kyle says Addison should consistently be getting targets in the backfield, either as a running back or going for a pass on jet sweeps like 3 times a game. I don't need that. I need him to get the ball underneath, though. I don't need him to be in the backfield specifically. I need him to I just need him to get the ball on easy passes. And this is what we have not seen a whole lot of Jefferson or Addison this year get. And Addison missed a few games, but even Naylor is easy passes. When all of your receivers have to average 20 yards a catch, that means you're always pushing it so much down the field. I think that you should, or O'Connell should focus on Addison quickly off the line of scrimmage. I think we will see that this week. Quickly off the line of scrimmage. He has such fast feet. He is now back to being healthy after dealing with those ankle injuries. I want the ball in his hands a lot more this week.
Don't be cute, just be efficient.
Yeah.
That's all I can really say to that is just we don't need them to be doing any fancy trick stuff like, oh, this guy's in the backfield and he's normally a wide receiver. No, just get him the ball in the most efficient way possible. And I think it's going to help everybody, everybody in the entire football team, especially on the defensive side too, because you're maintaining drives, you're moving the chains, you're keeping possession, you're not letting your defense get worn down.
Okay, one more for you. Anthony says you could throw a bet down on all the NFC North teams to win the NFC Championship. Why not? How about this, Manny, before you go? The NFC North to win the NFC Championship versus the field versus everybody else in the NFC. So you can either take the whole NFC North or everyone else in the NFC. Who are you taking?
Right now, I'm taking the NFC North.
I would as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure about Chicago, winning, going to the Super Bowl this year, but I'm looking at Detroit, Minnesota, and even Green Bay, and saying like, I mean, Green Bay is not perfect, but they could get hot.
Oh yeah.
They
Oh
could
yeah.
they could just catch fire late in the season, and Jordan Love could just go on a tear, kind of like what Aaron Rodgers did in 2010, where they were just unstoppable and everything just sort of came together for them. I could see something like that happening for Green Bay. Obviously, I think Minnesota and Detroit are the class of the conference right now, and I think you're going to have Green Bay there in the conversation as well.
I think of all the other teams in the entire NFC, there's only one that I would be concerned would have a better chance or a chance to eliminate the NFC North teams. And that is the San Francisco 49ers, because they have been so banged up that
Yep.
if they were to get healthy, if McCaffrey comes back at the end of the year and they were to get to 100%, they are still very dangerous.
Yep.
Not having home field advantage, that might hurt them a lot. They've lost twice at US Bank Stadium in the last 2 years. So there's that. I'm just thinking of all the other NFC teams. Who really scares you? It's probably San Francisco. I'm not sure I could say Washington yet. I don't think the Eagles are back at that level where they used to be. Nobody in the South. Yeah, I would definitely take the North over everybody else to win the NFC Championship. Thursday night, Manny, we will go hardcore on this. And also, I got a fun game. I don't want you to do your favorite Lions because they're just in the division. Everybody knows the players. But here's what I want. I want a Vikings Lions all-time offense for us to put
Mm,
together, for us each to draft Vikings Lions all-time offenses and compare and have people vote on who has the better Vikings Lions all-time offense. So we'll do that on Thursday night, and we'll have a lot of fun then. This is going to be a really, really exciting week to lead up to the game. So I appreciate it, Manny. Thanks for your time.
you got it. Football.
Football. All right. Okay. So I'm going to hang around and answer questions for another half hour or so. So I'll work my way down the feed here, and feel free to throw in any more questions that you have, comments, trade targets, thoughts, feelings, emotions. Vikings are in the conversation for the best team in the NFL. And if they win this week, then it will be pretty much not debatable. Maybe the Chiefs would be the only other team, because you always have to give it to the Chiefs, even if their offense does not have the same type of numbers as the Vikings do. Is the Faithful says, I've had a feeling for a week now that Darnold is going to light it up against the Lions, and Lions defense will give up huge plays. For whatever reason, Aaron Glenn's defense against the Vikings has been a disaster. I mean, I don't know that there's been a single game since Aaron Glenn has been the defensive coordinator of the Lions where the Vikings have struggled offensively. Somebody's going to have to correct me if there was one, but even last year, the final game of the season, and Nick Mullins is out there throwing the ball all over the place. And he is one drive away from being right in that game. The home game against that defense, Nick Mullins went crazy and just threw some wild interceptions, but put up a ton of yards in that game. This is a mismatch. Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings receivers versus the Detroit Lions defense. I don't know if it's scheme. I don't know if it's personnel has been at the center of it before, and they have been a better defense this year. There's no doubt about that they have played much better defensively, but they've also allowed a good amount of yards, and Seattle put up some yardage against them and was able to move the football. I agree with you that it really comes down to whether the Lions can score, because I do think that the Vikings offense will be able to move the football against the Lions. Their corners are better than they were before. Their secondary is better. Their pass rush is just okay without Aiden Hutchinson, if not mediocre. And schematically, I have just felt since Glenn took over that they have not been one step ahead, that they have been one step behind a lot of the other defenses in the NFL. What they might do this week without Hutchinson is just blitz constantly. And that would offer some new challenges. It would also offer some one-on-one matchups. I am definitely leaning toward the Vikings putting up yards in this one. Clifford says, what's the percentage of Vikings running left versus right? Seems to me they run left a lot more. I looked this up not too long ago. Surprisingly, it was pretty even. I didn't look it up this week, but maybe 2 weeks ago, because I had the same theory. I wondered, oh, do they not run to the right? It's about even. It wasn't much different. The only thing is that if they change right guards, then it might have to be different because you can't run behind Dalton Risner all the time. He's not a good run blocker, but also I didn't think it was so bad last year that you just couldn't play him. It's not a strength like it is with Ingram, but Ingram also isn't so good at run blocking that he's just plowing human bodies down the field. I think that Risner can survive in the run game and be a huge upgrade in the pass game. Blowfishes says, I just hate seeing our right guard standing still in the middle of a play looking lost. Yeah, all the time. 3-4 times a game. He disengages too early at times and allows extended plays to get blown up. 100%. I mean, there's too many lapses. It is a game of concentration in the NFL, and it is not easy to concentrate for that many minutes, plays, hours on a Sunday. And the guys who are great at it are elite, and the guys who can't stay locked in for an entire game are average or below. And that is the biggest issue that he's had, where it's just those quick losses, blocking the wrong person, looking a little lost. Yeah, I mean, that's why they need to make a change to have a veteran player in Dalton Risner, I think. I just don't need any more evidence than what we've gotten. I really don't. For 3 years now, or 2.5 years of performance to draw from. Wrigley, is Marshawn Lattimore a realistic trade target at the deadline? Good question. I don't know. I like the idea of trading for a corner. The thing with Lattimore is, if I get to have my cake and eat it too at the trade deadline, what I'm really looking for is somebody that they can trade for and keep. So not just a rent-a player, but somebody that they could trade for and then sign to an extension, or somebody that is expensive that a team is looking to kind of get younger or fresher and move off from a big contract, but maybe the Vikings can take it because of the cap space. That's what I'm looking for a little more than Lattimore, who's been banged up a lot. And is he really an upgrade? It would give them depth, but is he going to be better than the guys that they have? Like, is this version of Marshawn Lattimore better than what they have with Shaq Griffin? I'm not convinced of that. I think J.C. Horn would be. And that's why the guy I keep going back to is J.C. Horn, because he's on the Panthers. They're going to have to give him $100 million this offseason. Do they want to do that, or do they want to just make sure they're as flexible as possible into the future? Horn has been a little banged up in his career, but is a really good player that they could get and extend. That's more along the lines I'm looking for. If they were going to give up Lattimore for very cheap, then maybe. But only really his depth. I don't know where he's at as far as a starting corner. Look at that defense from the Saints. It's miserable. Mike says, in the cart before the horse category, at what point does KO start talking about home field advantage in the playoffs? We lost that in 17 and had to go to Philly. So important to playoff success. Yeah, definitely way down the road from that. I mean, you're talking about very end of the season. So if you were already locked up into playoff position and playing for home field, then you go all in and try to play for it. But it's not like in 2017 they could have really done anything different. Just so happened that Philadelphia also won 13 games that year. It's not like they could have played differently than what they did in 2017. But you're right. It is important. I don't think it's quite as important as it used to be, home field advantage in the playoffs, but it would be a big deal if they could get there. But that's, yeah, you're talking way down the road there for sure. Blowfish says, I've seen KOC go for longer plays on 3rd and short when Aaron Jones isn't on the field. Yeah, that's a major issue, is those 3rd and short, 4th and short. It's very frustrating, honestly, that because they throw so often when a simple run is probably for the best. Sometimes they're doing end arounds, which, yeah, it worked once, but then the second time they tried it, it didn't. You need to be able to just have an answer. Philadelphia having the tush push, and don't have Brandon Powell as the tush pusher again. That's for sure. But Philadelphia having an answer is such a big advantage to be able to convert and convert and convert. The Vikings need a ground game, a play, two different plays that they can go to consistently to convert on those third and shorts, because having to throw it every time is just difficult. Like, the pressure is on. There's a lot of guys at the line of scrimmage, and you think, oh, well, we're going to get opportunities down the field. But if there's a little bit of pressure, if anything happens, you don't complete it. And throwing it any more than 5 yards in the air is kind of crazy to me, unless you've drawn up something where someone could be wide open. Kyle says Sanders or Hubbard will do. Yeah, I think so. 5th round pick for Miles Sanders. That makes sense to me. Joe says T. Higgins is a luxury item they don't need to spend their limited draft capital when there are immediate needs. Receiver room is very good. TJ coming back. Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, yeah. I mean, when you talk about luxury items, though, I mean, this is the time to get them, my friend. I mean, if you're ever trying to add bling to your house, now would be the time at 5-0. If there's ever time where you're saying, can we get one more? Look, I like Jalen Naylor a lot. I really do. I think Jalen Naylor is a terrific receiver. But if they had someone like T. Higgins and pushed Addison to wide receiver 3, that is the best trio of receivers in the NFL in a very long time. And remember, when the Cincinnati Bengals went to the Super Bowl, they had one of the best trios of receivers in a very long time. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd was actually good then, not so much now, but he was actually good then. I mean, if Jordan Addison for a year is your wide receiver 3, got to feel pretty good about that. And Naylor can just come in and rotate. T. Higgins is an exceptional wide receiver. It's crazy, just a little outside of the box there. I wanted to think of something that was totally different from just saying defensive tackle, running back. I mean, because I think that's obvious. In Blowfish's ads, we have 4 good outside linebackers. I know it's the same story, though. It's the same story. I agree that running back, cornerback depth, defensive line, I agree that those are the obvious places to go. But if I told you that Khalil Mack could show up here, for example, I don't think they would trade him, not Harbaugh, not where that team is, but just for example, if you were able to get a edge rusher that would allow Van Ginkel to move wherever he wants, could give Grenard a break, push Patrick Jones is into a good role, Jihad Ward, but add just even more juice to that thing. I don't see a reason not to, if we're talking about add as much talent as you possibly can to this team. And if we're looking at the most valuable positions, then go for them and find ways to use those guys. I don't think Jalen Naylor is so good or Patrick Jones is so good that you couldn't have somebody else sort of supersede them. Jones has been good, but he's gotten sacks, but as far as the actual pressures per snap, maybe a little bit of difficult to sustain over a season. And he's certainly not as good as someone who's, excellent, like a top draft pick like Chase Young. So, man, it's a thought experiment of like, what could you add to this to make it even deeper and even better? Just because a position is filled doesn't mean you can't add a little more, especially at the defensive line. When your cup runneth over on the defensive line, that's just better for you. That means everybody is fresh all the time. Kerpluppy, do we have any temperature on if we're actually going to do a trade? When would you expect the hammer to drop? Thanks for the hard work, King. You're welcome. It's not hard work talking football with you, but sure thing. So the answer is my feeling. This is just my feeling. I'm not reporting. Okay. My feeling is that they would do a trade to add somebody who could help them potentially compete for a championship. And that feeling is largely based on what they did before, which is they got to this very point and they looked around and they said, hey, we're one of the best teams in the NFC. And even though in 2022, they were being talked about as frauds And there was an element of that team that was unsustainable. We know that. It was called the defense that was unsustainable, but it was still one of those, hey, you only get so many seasons where you are in line to win 13 games. Go get as much talent as you can. And oh, by the way, if you do it this way, you could keep the guy. And that was the deal with TJ Hockenson. And that's why I'm looking at situations like that with a JC Horn. And I'm sure there's others. And if you've got other ideas, send them my way. But I look at this as kind of a hack to the draft. If you can use a trade on a player that you get to keep over multiple seasons and you have the cap space to do it, the 49ers did this. They acquired Christian McCaffrey, and didn't they trade for Trent Williams too? They traded for guys who could make them significantly better in the short term, but over multiple seasons, not just, hey, it's a 1-year deal and then the guy hits free agency. Or even if someone is an upcoming free agent, but they think, hey, once you're in this building, we can give you a good offer. We can keep you here. That's why I think the answer is yes. Also, this is a metrics team that looks at the numbers and evaluates how good you really are. And when you look at the Vikings on paper, and it changes every week, okay? So if they give up 58 points, this won't be true next week. But as of right now, as of when this decision gets to be made, the metrics point to the Vikings. The point differential is the simplest one, but expected points added on both sides of the ball, success rate, DVOA. They're the number one team in DVOA, which is the yardage statistic from Aaron Schatz. All the numbers are saying this team is good. Look at the competition. Look at the upcoming schedule. My temperature is out of 100 potential degrees, I'm 90 degrees on that they would make a trade if the opportunity comes around. I think that they will. I think that, and as far as when it could happen, anytime. I wouldn't expect it maybe tomorrow, but where it would make the most sense is after the Rams game, because they have an extended window there, Thursday night football. If you make the trade right before Thursday night football, the guy plays against Indianapolis, gets a whole week to practice. That's where I would look for it if they're going to do it. Rob says, I think we should draft a running back, go for a two-headed monster in the backfield. I like that ETN's name is being thrown around. ETN has not been the same, but I'm still interested because he was so good last year. That word draft is banned from the show currently, so I'm not going to talk about that. But as far as ETN, in a week like this, we don't need to ever bring up next year's draft. But when it comes to the current running back situation, ETN was so good for the Jaguars last year, and it's maybe an odd situation, or maybe is an injury. They would have to know about that. But the two-headed monster idea, I love it. I love the idea of, or really three-headed monster, Aaron Jones, running back that they trade for. Ty Chandler is kind of the change of pace that they can bring in from time to time. I think that type of option is a really good one to solidify what they have in the backfield, because right now it feels very thin. It just feels very delicate in the backfield. And you saw it when Aaron Jones got hurt. It just doesn't look the same. Thoughts on Kyron Williams as a deadline trade? Does he play for the Rams? Isn't he for the Rams? If you're talking about the Rams guy, I don't know what their deal is. The Rams strike me as a type of team that is much more along the lines of they're going to fight to the finish as opposed to trade away their players. That's how I look at it. Maybe they might, but I don't know if they're trading away one of their best players at this point because they have Matthew Stafford. You really can't give up. Like, you have to kind of fight, and their division is not good. So you could always get on a run and get in a playoff spot. Andrew says, I'm still confused by not bringing back Akers. I feel like a lot better with him in the RB room. The only thing I could come up with there, because Kevin O'Connell did not answer that question when he was asking about it. Oh, Mike, you were thinking of Raheem Mostert. I mean, Kyron Williams is a great player out there, but Mostert, yeah, I think he's banged up and old. So I'm not sure that that's the guy I would be looking at. I like the idea of Tony Pollard. Travis Etienne a little bit less, but Tony Pollard is playing great. He's on kind of a big contract, but the Vikings could afford that next year, and he could be their running back for next year if Aaron Jones is done playing, or I don't know what his situation is going to be. So, but that would give you the multi-year player, is what I'm thinking, with Tony Pollard as a potential option. As far as Cam Akers goes, I really, really like Cam Akers a lot. I was so impressed with him, and I think it must have come down to just the health situation. That he was coming off of 2 Achilles, and they probably gave him physical and checked him out physically and decided it wasn't a great idea. But I'm mostly with you. I thought he was coming back. Kyle says Jeffrey Simmons trade after we destroy the Rams on prime time. Jeffrey Simmons would completely change this defense. He really would. He really would. If they could, I don't know how you get a player like that. I haven't seen anything that he's going to be traded. If you have, let me know. If there's an article or something like that, let me know. But when it comes to Jeffrey Simmons, I've put him on my trade list just because I feel like they're in a position where you trade really expensive players and you start to tear it down and build from square one. But I don't see why they would do it, because he's really good, and I don't think they expect to be down that long. But if he's miserable and he's trying to force his way out, which I think I would be if I was him, could be. He saw how nice it was here. Don't Care Bear says, what's the real meaning behind the NFL flags behind you? Do you secretly wish for a Vikings-Bills Super Bowl? So for those listening on the audio version, over my left shoulder is a Vikings flag. Over my right shoulder is the Bills. And then all the other teams have their own little flags from the 80s or 70s, which were sent to me by a listener. So a listener found these flags in his garage and sent me an email and said, hey, I found these awesome flags from like 40, 50 years ago, old NFL helmets. Do you want them? And I was working on decorating this studio here, and I had bought the picture behind me that's the US Bank Stadium in downtown Minneapolis. And I pulled them out of the bag when I got them in the mail, and I went, oh my gosh, these are awesome. I love these. So, I taped them up back there. But of course, the reason that I put the Bills and the Vikings as the 2 teams in the center are because I am from Buffalo and cover the Vikings. There wasn't too much thought about it. Yep, that was it. And come on, if there was a Vikings and Bills Super Bowl, how great would that be? 2 teams that have been so many times, haven't won it. Of course that went into it. Yep. But I tried, well, it's so there are some teams behind me that used to be in different conferences. So there is that. Did I put them in the right divisions? I don't think that I did. Did I put them? No, I didn't really think too much about the divisions. I just kind of put them in random order. Other than that. Anyway, so there's the story. Blowfish is Latavius Murray still available. I don't know if he wants to play. I mean, at this point, he's like 34 years old, and I know Latavius, and he is a worldly gentleman. He's a really smart guy. I know that he's got business stuff that he's into. I just don't know that he was always I can only play football forever. I don't think he was that kind of guy that would only play football forever, but maybe he's keeping himself in shape. He's probably like 35 also at this point. I'd rather trade for a younger running back than Murray, but I mean, any opportunity to get Latavius back in the locker room would be good for all reporters. Mike says, crazy thought. Is there a special team signing that could make a difference? If you're a free agent now, you can't make a difference, most likely in the NFL. But I think with special teams, are just worried about it too much. I mean, it was a bad game, and I kind of, in the Friday mailbag newsletter, went off a little bit about this, but none of their numbers in terms of special teams are bad. It's just that they did some very stupid things against the Jets. That's really all it was. Saw some of you calling for Matt Daniels to be fired, which is just, come on, guys. Like it was just a bad couple of plays that led to some penalties. Jay Ward and Caleb Evans, who just probably shouldn't be playing the gunner position because now Najee Thompson is gone. There's just a couple of miscues. Maybe if there's a trade for, I don't even know what, a swap of fifths next year or in 2026, and you could bring in someone's good special teamer. I really don't know. I think more than anything, they've been totally fine on special teams outside of that one game where they had a few miscues, and the one penalty was extremely questionable. Oh gosh says, why don't we get Cordero Patterson back? Helps us in the running and return game. He's old as dirt, but worth a seventh. If they have a seventh, I think is it just the first and 2/5 or something? You guys know how sad draft season is going to be. That's why the word draft is banned for a really long time from the show, because what are you going to draft next year? Nothing with no picks is, I mean, I assume we'll do a draft show, but I'll just be talking about the other teams at that point, and hopefully you all want to listen to that. Cordero Patterson, always a yes from me. I don't know if he's got any burst left, though. That he's had a lot of injuries. He's had a lot of time that he's missed. And I think that train probably ran out when he was in Atlanta. He's just not the same type of player anymore. And once the burst goes away, he's just not the same guy. As far as a return guy, I also think that it's Kevin O'Connell's plan to not return kicks and not allow the other team to return kicks. That just seems to be his approach. He just kick it out of the back of the end zone. Now, as far as Patterson as a weapon, if Cordero looks like he did a few years ago, then yeah, I just don't know that that's what he's going to look like because he's had quite a few injuries along the way. And it's just hard to expect him to be a significant weapon. And that's kind of the issue. But I mean, he was one of the most popular Vikings. Maybe. I just don't know what's there. I would have to see him play. And I haven't really seen him play this year. Has he been even in for Pittsburgh? Has he been playing? Because I haven't caught any of him playing so far this year. Anyway, so upcoming schedule on the show. Michael asks if I think they should bring Patrick Peterson back. Yeah, I talked about this a little earlier, Michael. When we're talking about bringing back old Vikings, Thielen, Peterson, Patterson, Adrian Peterson got brought up the other night. I'm not sure that any of them are a good idea, even though everyone likes Patrick Peterson. Does he fit in what Brian Flores wants to do any better than anything else, anyone else, right? Because we are talking about somebody who last year did drop off pretty significantly in his performance. He hasn't been playing at all. How much can he really add to the cornerback group versus someone else that you could trade for if you needed cornerback depth, or even just Fabian Morrow, who's played quite a bit in the NFL? I mean, at this point in the game, maybe Fabian Morrow is in better shape to be a backup corner than Patrick Peterson is. Not that I would ever doubt Patrick, not that I would not be happy to have him back. He was our media good guy, one of the most pleasant people to deal with that I've had in my career. And I mean, when you're talking with him, you're like talking to royalty in the NFL. But it's when somebody hasn't played all season, how much are you getting there? I don't know. Maybe. If they have an injury, I think the conversation changes a little bit. Matt says, coming in late here. Well, how dare you? Any right guards on rookie deals the Vikings can trade for, or is it just going to be Reisner? I was looking at this and I did not see anybody, and you'll have to take a look too. But oh gosh, says I take back my Cordero Patterson. He's riding the pine. Yeah, I didn't think that I'd seen him at all. So it's probably over. But as far as the right guards, there's one guy at the right guard position that I think is worth trading for. That's Brandon Sheriff. We've talked about him 100 times on the show over the years as someone they could potentially sign in free agency. And I saw somebody mention that he had talked about his two main targets for free agency had been the Vikings, and the Jaguars came in with more money when he signed there. So maybe there's a potential option to swap for him at right guard. But if a team has a really good right guard on a rookie deal, they're probably not moving him because there's just so few good right guards. I was looking up and down. If anyone's got a name, let me know. I was looking up and down this league for a right guard who is both good and possibly tradable. And that's Brandon Sheriff is the only one I could come up with. So I would do it, but he's the only one that I could come up with. And oh gosh, I would like to see a gadget guy in the Vikings offense. I agree, but does he use them? Does he use that position? It just doesn't seem like he does. Kene Nwangwu could have been that, never really did it. Even Jalen Naylor is ever so slightly this with a couple of reverses, but they don't do stuff like that a lot. There isn't really somebody that has ever had that position with this team. Even Ty Chandler could be that like a little bit. Ryan Kelly, maybe, but are they making trades or are they kind of in a bad division fighting for potentially winning the division there? Ezra Cleveland. Yeah. Some of the offensive line evaluation, folks, you're never going to believe this, has not been good for the Vikings with the interior. And trading Ezra Cleveland, I just don't know. I don't know what they didn't like about him. I know that toughness was an element, but all of his numbers have always been okay, if not good. I just don't really know why he needed to be shipped out. His contract was coming up, so they would have had to assign him to an extension. But he was a developing player, I thought, as opposed to the right guard situation, which has just been consistently bad. They may have made a bad choice there. Dividend Lions says, what's Laken Tomlinson up to? I think that's his name. Has Laken Tomlinson every single year ever been connected to like maybe the Vikings could trade for? I feel like he's always coming up. And I don't know that he's ever actually been a good player, but he's big. I mean, at this point, Dalton Reisner, if you're looking outside the building looking for trades and you saw a player with a very similar profile to Dalton Reisner, you would say, yeah, okay, that guy would be an upgrade. So, yeah, Matt says Ezra Cleveland should have been a tackle. Yeah, I mean, the problem with drafting a guy and moving him from tackle to guard is if he's not going to be able to do it right away and there's going to be a big learning curve there, then you're wasting his entire rookie contract developing him as at a position for somebody else, which is exactly what they did. They developed him for the Jaguars, who stink and don't need him. Yeah, that's the reality. Tight ends and guards and linemen in general are kind of like this. If you draft projects, you're often developing them for the next team, and because it takes quite a while to do. Anyway, well, this has been another really fun show. Tomorrow night, I will be live, normally on Tuesday. Oh, okay, that's funny. Andrew says, go get Taysom Hill. I think Hill's injured, isn't he? I think he got banged up. But tomorrow night, normally I run Tuesday Morning Left Guard live on the show as a premiere on YouTube on Tuesday night. But Jeremiah has to record on Wednesday. Also, I am going to the Lynx game on Wednesday night as opposed to going live, which means that I will be going live tomorrow night. So we will see what develops. I'll hear from the coordinators tomorrow. All the coordinators talking tomorrow. That will be really good. And so we'll be talking to everybody tomorrow. It'll be your night, all questions, nothing else, all chat. So look for that about 7:00 tomorrow night on Tuesday. And we'll go from there. That'll be really fun. And the rest of the week, Searles, Hobie Artigue, if you guys remember him from Fox 9, he's now in Detroit. I recorded a conversation with him earlier today. Really, really fun discussion. Hobie's a great guy. So look for that one. And then everything else going forward that we usually have. Andrew Kramer breaking down the game, all the usual suspects showing up, and Trevor Sikkema as well from PFF. Well, I mean, look, you're not going to be short on content for the rest of the week. So thank you so much to everybody who joined. Great chat as always. Great questions. Always appreciate it. And we will talk to you guys tomorrow here live. So take care, everybody. I forgot to say football. football.